ॐ गणानां त्वा गणपतिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमम् ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणस्पत आनः शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम् प्रणो देवी सरस्वती वाजेभिर्वाजिनीवती धीनामवित्र्यवतु गणेशाय नमः सरस्वत्यै नमः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ यश्छन्दसां वृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया स्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासम् शरीरं मे विचर्षणम् जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवम् ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः मेधा देवी जुषमाणा न आगाद्विश्वाची भद्रा सुमनस्य माना त्वया जुष्टानुगमाना दुरुक्तान् बृहद्वदेम विदधे सुवीराः त्वया जुष्ट ऋषिर्भवति देवी त्वया ब्रह्मा गतः श्रीरुतत्वया त्वया जुष्टश्चित्रं विन्दते वसुसानो जुषस्वत्र विनो न मेधे मेधां महीन्द्रो ददातु मेधां देवी सरस्वती मेधां मे अश्विना वुभावा धत्तां पुष्करस्रजा अप्सरासु च या मेधा गन्धर्वेषु च यन्मनः दैवीं मेधा सरस्वती सा मां मेधा सुरभिर्जुषत स्वाहा आमा मेधा सुरभिर्विश्वरूपा हिरण्यवर्णा जगति जगम्या ऊर्जस्वती पयसा बिन्वमाना सा मां मेधा सुप्रतीकाजुषन्ताम् मयि मेधां मयि प्रजां मय्यग्निस्तेजो दधातु मयि मेधां मयि प्रजां मयीन्द्र इन्द्रियं दधातु मयि मेधां मयि प्रजां मयि सूर्यो भ्राजो दधातु हंस हंसाय विद्महे परमहंसाय धीमहि तन्नो हंसः प्रचोदयात् ॐ साईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वः प्रचोदयात् स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्ताम् न्यायेन मार्गेण महीं महिषाः गोब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यम् समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Om Shri Sai Ram, offering my most sincere and loving pranams at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagwan, Shri Satya Sai Baba. With the divine blessings of Bhagavan, the Shri Satya Sai Samyukta Shruti Shreni brings you the episode number 18 of once a month lecture series entitled Gama Agama, to disseminate the Vedic knowledge as Vedas are the repositories of Indian culture. I feel it a privilege to have been given the opportunity to extend a warm welcome to all our brothers and sisters watching this program live on YouTube channel. Also, let me welcome and introduce our today's guest speaker, Srimati Praveena Anand ji, who will be enlightening us with her deep words of wisdom on Vedas, the foundation of Indian culture and spirituality. Srimati Praveena Anand ji is a Balvikas alumnus from Chennai and currently lives in Singapore. She was blessed by Bhagwan Baba when she entered a play and performed a dance in his divine presence. She is a multifaceted personality who brings in strong academics, rich global experiences, and a growing passion to go deep into Bharatiya roots. Srimati Praveena ji's passion is to learn and share the priceless knowledge treasure that Bharata as a nation can provide. Her focus is to learn, share this knowledge, and connect to day-to-day lives. More importantly, she wants to share the scientific achievements of the ancient land of Bharat. Towards this cause, she is associated with Sanskrit Bharati, where she constantly learns and imparts the language for the benefit of all the people. Her academic credentials include Executive Program in Business Management from IIM Kolkatta, Masters in Computer Applications and Bachelors in Commerce. In addition, she is a registered medical practitioner of alternative medicines, backflower remedies, a neuro-linguistic programming, a certified hypnotherapist. She is also a distinguished orator in various forums. Sairam, over to you, ma'am.
श्रुतं मे गोपाय
ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां हयग्रीवम् उपास्महे. Namaste. Pranams at the lotus feet of Sri Sri Bhagavan. Thanks to Sri Satya Sai Samyukta Shruti Shreni for bringing out this lecture series, Gama Agama, to disseminate the Vedic knowledge. It's indeed a great initiative by Sri Satya Sai Veda Poshana. I would like to thank Sri Subramanya Murthy Mahodaya for giving me this great opportunity. It's my pleasure to share a few of my learnings in this topic, the Vedas, the foundation of Indian culture and spirituality, part 18. Entaro Mahanubhavulu, Antariki na Vandanamu. So my pranams to each and every Mahatma who is present here. Today, I would like to explore a few important aspects of science in our Sanatana Dharma. Let me start with a beautiful story mentioned in the Upanishads itself. It is about Maharishi Bharadwaja. Bharadwaja Maharishi wanted to learn Vedas completely. Veda Adhyayana was his very, very important thing. So he learned the Vedas for one entire lifespan of his. Towards the end of that lifespan, he realized that he is not completed learning the Vedas. So he did his tapasya for extending his lifetime. And in his second lifetime as well, he spent his time on learning the Vedas. Not completed, he does his tapasya again, extends it by another lifespan, but then he has not completed learning the Vedas. So when he inquired to the Lord as to why am I not feeling contented, I don't feel that I've actually learned the Vedas in spite of taking 3 lifespans. Why is it? The Lord says, okay, bring 3 mushtika purna of the dried grass. You know, there are 3 huge mountains on the other side. So when Bharadwaja Maharishi brings 3 handful of dried grass from all the 3 mountains that's there, the Lord says, can you see how much of dried grass you have in your hand? That is the quantum of Vedas that you've actually learned in these 3 lifespans. What is yet to be learned is what you see as the mountains on the other side. So, jnana, with jnane, the word Veda comes from the root with, which means jnana. The abundance of knowledge, the universal knowledge is Vedas. Akhanda vai Vedaha, you know, that is unending, it is huge. So attempting to learn every single thing is going to be a humongous task, because even for Maharishi Bharadwaja, after 3 completely dedicated lifespans, all he could learn is only his 3 handful of dried grass quantity. So Vedas are our pramana because it has the ultimate universal knowledge. It is anati, it's always been there, which means it will always continue to exist. Apaurusheya, it is not authored by any person. Is Vedas not been written by Bhagavan? The breath of Bhagavan is considered as Vedas. Even he has not authored it. It is Bhagavan's own swasa, which is the Vedas, which means Ananta, Anati, Akhanda, Apaurusheya are the unique traits of our Vedas. And that is why we hold Vedas as pramana. And that is the source of all knowledge. That is our pramana. Now, having said this, because so much of knowledge are always there, and we always thrive on learning more and more knowledge, our Sanatana Dharma shows us a lot of our ancestors who've been gaining a lot of happiness by dwelling on this knowledge. The sloka I recited before we started this session is also about Bhagavan Hayagriva, who is himself a source of knowledge. The sloka starts as Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmalaspatikakritam. The deity Hayagriva, who has the face of a horse, Jnanam Anandamayam Devam. He is in the form of Ananda, he is in the form of bliss. Why? Because of knowledge. Immersed in so much of knowledge, he himself is a personification of bliss. Nirmala, Spatika Kritam. He is like Nirmala, absolutely nothing which can affect the greatness, the shine. Absolutely no dirt there. Spatika, like the Spatika. We've seen the Spatika money, right? It's so transparent and it is full of shine. And who is he? Adharam Sarva Vidyanam. Whatever is our knowledge source, he is the source of that knowledge. That is the God with the Hayavatana, with the horse face. Hayagrivam Upasmahe. So Jnana Ananda, knowledge is happiness in our Sanatana Dharma. There is this wonderful episode which is mentioned in Chandogya Upanishad, where Maharishi Narada, Devarishi, he goes to Sanat Kumara Maharishi and he says, will you please accept me as your student? I really want to learn a lot. Now, typically when somebody wants to go as a student, the teacher will ask questions. They will ask like, okay, what do you already know? Tell me what you know so that I know where to start. So here, Sanat Kumara Maharishi asks the same question to Devarishi Narada. He says, can you please tell me what you already know so that I know where to start? This is a very, very interesting conversation because the person who's approaching is not a normal person. He is Devarishi Narada. And Sanat Kumara Maharishi is asking him, okay, first of all, tell me what you know so that I know where to start. Now, Devarishi Narada, what all he says is, mind-boggling. He says, Rigvedam Bhagavodhyemi Yajurvedam Samaveda Atharvanam Chaturtam Itihasa Puranam Panchamam. So I know all the 4 Vedas. In addition to that, knowing 4 Vedas, we just understood how difficult it is. So Devarishi Narada says, I have read the 4 Vedas. In addition to that, I know the Itihasas, which is Ramayana, Mahabharata. I know the Puranas. We know about the 18 Mahapuranas in addition to, all the other Puranas. He also says, Vedanam Vedam. I know about the grammar. Pitriyam. Pitriyam is the Antima rites, right? So I know about all that. Rashim, Daivam, Nidim. So he basically goes on to say that, I know about the science of the omens. I know about the underground resources. I know about logic. He goes on to say all the vidyas that is mentioned here, including astronomy, the science relating to Sarpa Vidya, the snakes. He knows about, music, dance, and all the other fine arts. So he basically lists all those which are available, whatever we know today. And then he goes on to say, now I have come here to learn from you. Now, this kind of inquisitiveness to learn after knowing all what we have to know is our Sanatana Dharma. That is the great Sanskriti which we've been following. This exhaustive list given by Sage Narada about the different branches of knowledge proves how knowledgeable our ancient literature was and how knowledgeable our ancestors were and what kind of a legacy they've transferred to us. So what are the kind of knowledge that we all always had is very interesting for us to understand. So we have the 4 Vedas, which I said is the ultimate source of knowledge for us. Now, in order to understand this great knowledge, we have to have some additional knowledge sources, which are called as the Vedangas. We have 6 Vedangas: Siksha, Vyakarana, Chandas, Kalpa, Nirukta, and Jyotisha. These can be understood as some basic things which are required for us to understand Vedas. For example, Vyakarana is the grammar. Without knowing grammar, can we possibly, English grammar, let's take. Without knowing English grammar, it's not possible for us to read any English book, be it fiction or non-fiction, right? Similarly, we have to know the Vyakarana or the grammar in order to understand the Vedas. Chandas are the meters used in the Vedas. Jyotisha is to give us the right time in order to conduct the yajnas and yagas that's mentioned in the Vedas. Shiksha is for the right pronunciation. Nirukta is the etymology. So all these are basically the angas for us to understand the Vedas. Now, upangas are for us to get clarity on a lot of abstract things. So we have 4 upa-angas, which are the Mimamsa, Nyaya Vistara, which is a lot about logic. Puranas are the Itihasa Puranas that we just spoke about. And we have a compilation of all what we have to implement in our daily life in terms of, do's and not to do kind of things, rules, regulations, which are all mentioned in the Dharma Shastra. Which day, what are the things that we have to do, every ritual, every practices we have to do. The compilation of Dharma Shastra is there. Now, these 14 together, the 6 Vedangas, in addition to the 4 Upa-angas, and ultimately the Angi, which is the Vedas, these 14 together are called as the Chaturdasha Vidyasthanas, or the 14 Vidyasthanas. Now, these can be applied to our everyday life in different ways, right? If we want good health, if we want to maintain our wellness, we use Ayurveda, which is called as one of the Upavedas or a Dharmasthana. For warfare, people have to be trained properly. So that is the Dhanur Veda. The Gandharva Veda is for the music, dance, and fine arts. The Artha Shastra is the application of these sources of knowledge, which is for politics, for management, for other economical things. So we know about the Chanakya Niti and everything like that, right? All these are part of the Artha Shastra, the knowledge derived from the management, political, and the economic concepts. So basically, all what we needed for our life were there from the Vidyasthanas. So together we have like the 14 Vidyasthanas and the 4 Dharmasthanas, which are together called as the Ashtadasha Vidyasthanas most frequently. So these 18 are the sources of our knowledge. In addition to this, we of course know that we had the 64 kalas. So people used to implement a lot of the art forms, which was part of the regular lifestyle, where people learned about the 64 kalas. So with so much of knowledge that was available, people treasured the knowledge and enjoyed the bliss of knowledge, which is why we are called as Bharatiyas. Basurata Bharata. Bha means the effulgence, the radiance. And those who got immersed in this radiance of knowledge were the Bharatiyas. So knowledge is usually compared to radiance or bliss, right? That is why Bhaskara is the name of sun god, because he is so much of radiance. The goddess of knowledge is called Bharati because she is full of radiance. And our country is called as Bharatam because it's full of enjoyment of knowledge. Knowledge is compared to light. And we are Bharatiyas because we enjoy the bliss of knowledge. So with so much of knowledge available, where do we start? Because if sages are not able to understand Vedas fully, how do we get benefited by it? Our ancestors have made our life very, very simple by giving us a very, very unique oral tradition. The oral tradition focuses on our ucharana, shabda matra, just the sound of it, the way we pronounce it, the way we use the different parts of our mouth can lead to a lot of benefits for us. So starting from the pronunciation, our ancestors have ensured that we get a lot of benefit. So if you look at the pronunciation of any Veda mantra or any of our traditional knowledge that is required, we use different parts of the mouth The oshta is the lips. We could use even the anunasika, the nose. The danta, teeth can be used when we pronounce. The khanta or the throat can be used. The palate, the talavya or the murdanya, the soft palate, can also be used. So when we use the different parts of our mouth, what happens is the different regions of our brain gets triggered. So that would lead us to utilizing different parts of our brain, which is a very, very interesting concept, which we do not find in most of the new languages or the modern languages. In fact, because almost all pronunciations are used in our traditional way of using our mouth, what happens is that the cleft palate deformity now uses our Deva Bhasha, Samskrita Bhasha, to identify where the actual difficulty is. So scientifically, they ask people to repeat the different words, and it is very easy to identify which pronunciation is hindered, because Samskrita Bhasha uses all parts of the mouth in order to communicate. Therefore, cleft palate deformity is identified by asking people to repeat the Samskrita Bhasha. Now, this beautiful Bhasha is what is used in our mantras, in our Vedas, in so many of our Itihasas, Puranas, and all the 18 Vidyasthanas that I was mentioning, because of which the pronunciation is helping us utilize different parts of our brain. In fact, there was a news item which came in Doordarshan recently, which mentioned that the neuroscientists have explored something called as a Sanskrit effect. It seems the MRI scans show that memorizing the ancient mantras increase the size of the brain regions associated with cognitive functions. If you can just go and Google for Sanskrit effect, you will be able to get the news item along with the video which was covered in the DD News itself. So repeating the mantras has proved to increase our brain capacity. No wonder our ancestors knew a lot more. They communicated, they left a legacy for us with so much of knowledge. Now, the pronunciation is very, very important. All of you are reciting the Veda mantras, which is such a great blessing, because we know that we have the Udata, Anudata, and Swarita for pronunciation. So if we just take A as an Akshara, for example, so the Udata, Anudata, and Swarita, 3 ways of pronouncing it is there. We also have the Hrasva, Dirgha, Pluta, which is like, 1 matra, 2 matras, or a longer pronunciation. Rama, Sita, or, when Maricha called, hey, Rama, that is an extended, which is a Pluta way of pronouncing it. And we can also pronounce everything using our Mukha or Nasika. So this combination of Udata, Anudata, Swarita, 3, Hrasva, Dirgha, Pluta, 3, Mukha, Nasika, another 2, 3 into 3 into 2 gives us 18 different ways of pronouncing just the Akshara A. A can be pronounced in 18 different ways. So because of this kind of a variety of pronouncing the different Aksharas in Samskrita, pronunciation is given paramount importance. That is why we have the Samhita, where words are repeated using the structures, the combinations. We have the Vakya or the Samhita, we have the Padapada, we have the Kramapada, the Jatapada, the Shikhapada, all the way going to the Ganapata, where the combination is quite heavy. Gana means heavy. So because of that heaviness, people who recite this are themselves called as Ganapatihal. And we retained our knowledge of pronouncing it by way of this Maukika Parampara, the Shruti Parampara. We hear it repeated the same way, and it's been transferred from generation to generation to generation for thousands of years, where whoever recites it across the region, if it is Agnimihile, that me will be me wherever we go across the globe. So there is absolutely no change. All these are because of the structure and the oral transfer of knowledge that we've been having. Some consider the oral tradition as, something which is not powerful. But think about it. Today, we have a concept of written tradition where we document everything. I was just thinking about it. Whatever we used possibly 2 decades back, which we had in our computer, we had stored it, we had a floppy disk at that point of time. Is any of that available, retrievable today? It's doubtful. In fact, in the middle, I remember we had something called as the LED or the LCD players, the huge, CD kind of things, which were much bigger, was there. We don't even see anything like that today. In fact, what we had in our cassettes are not available to us today. So, in spite of advance in technology, we have lost a lot of data within the last few decades. But our oral tradition, in spite of a lot of invasions, we have retained that tradition thanks to the oral tradition, where people had it in their mind and transferred it across. So such was the vision of our ancestors, to retain our knowledge. All this knowledge which our ancestors transferred to us was with a purpose of devotion, dedication, gaining a lot of Vedic wisdom, etc. Now, where is the concept of science in this? We spoke about the 18 Vidya Sthanas, and of course, cleft palate was one of the examples by pronunciation. But what kind of science is incorporated, and how was this incorporated? Did science exist earlier? These are the typical kind of questions we usually face. I will give you one very, very interesting example which will help us understand this from a very different perspective. Now, I explained about the 6 different Vedangas and how understanding these limbs of Vedas, the Vedangas, help us to understand the Vedas. So the Siksha, Vyakaranam, Chandas, Kalpa, Nirukta, and Jyotisha. So let us just take one example called the Shrauta Sutras. So the Shrauta Sutras, Bodhayana Sutras, Manava Sutras, Apastamba Sutras, Katyayana Sutras, all these are there. So now Veda, the Angi, is there. In the Yajur Veda, there are 4 different Vedas, right? Rik, Yajur, Sama, Atharva. So in the Yajur Veda, we have the Taittiriya Brahmana. So in the Taittiriya Brahmana, we have explanations of how to build the altars, the Vedis or the Chittis, how to construct these are mentioned. Because after the Gurukula, when people go into the Brahmacharya, they are supposed to perform a lot of Yajna Yagas, for which different kind of altars should be constructed. And there are many, many rules on how the altar should be constructed, what should be the shape of the altar, what should be the height of the altar. If it's performed for the first time, what should the height be? If the karta's height is so much, what should the height be? So there are a lot of combinations which decide on what should be the size, shape, depending on what is performed. A lot of rules should be there. Now, these are the kalpas, and in this you have the Bodhayana Shulpa Sutra. Sutras are basically the aphorisms which give us the procedure for measuring and constructing the various geometric shapes and sizes. So when we are constructing these kind of homakuntas, okay, one beautiful Bodhayana Sutra was revealed to their Sishyas. Now the Shishyas had to construct one altar. And for this altar, they had earlier done possibly 2 different altars of smaller size. This time they had to ensure that the altar is of a bigger size than the previous times. So in order to accomplish this, a sutra was mentioned in the Bodhayana Sutra. So this starts with Dirgha Chaturashra, So today we know this as the very famous Pythagoras theorem, which is one of the sutras in Bodhayana Sutra. So what this basically says is that the areas of the squares produced separately by the length and breadth of a rectangle together equal to the area of the square produced by the diagonal. So the sutra basically explains, have a rope, okay? Now place the two squares on the two sides so that you could create a right angle triangle. So if A is one side of the right angle triangle, B is the other side. Now the rope can measure C, and with C as one of the sides, you can construct a square, and this altar will definitely be big, so that they could construct the Homakunda. This was the application of the Pythagoras theorem earlier, and today we are thought of it as Pythagoras theorem. It was originally the Bodhayana theorem, which was the Bodhayana Sutra, which was used in order to construct a Homakunda. So this way, what we call as science or mathematics today was used for a totally different purpose by our ancestors, most of which was rituals, but huge mathematical calculations was done, geometry was employed, and different kind of purpose and reasoning was there behind all these things. In fact, we, as all of you know, have used zeros earlier. We are also aware of the beautiful Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat, which is the Shanti mantra of the Ishavacha Upanishad in Sukla Yajurveda, which we can understand is like a concept of infinity, which is brought in. And there are also so many other mathematical references which we can see in the Rig Veda, the Taittiriya Samhita, etc. In Rig Veda, there is one place which speaks about the number of horses, which is praising Indra as a lord, which says, please come with 20, 30, 40 horses, 60, 70 horses. So it is all about, the sequence of numbers with 20, 30, 40, etc. Though the mantra is in praise of Indra, we can see the sequence of numbers which is mentioned there. And there is another Rig Veda 3.99, which speaks about number which is 3339, 33 plus 303 plus 3003, and it is close to the eclipse cycle of 18 years. So a lot of these concept of numbers are actually beautifully mentioned in our Vedas. And a very, very interesting thing for you to note is the multiples of 4 occurring in Taittiriya Samhita. Ekachame, so you all will be aware of that, right? So the multiples of 4 are mentioned here. So if you keep observing, so much of numbers, mathematics has been used in our Vedas. And very interestingly, in one of the slokas in Valmiki Ramayana, during the Yuddha Kanda, there is a explanation of the army of Bhagavan Rama, where the attendants of Ravana go and inform Ravana as to what is the kind of size of Bhagavan Rama's army. So in this explanation, a few slokas speak about the huge number system that was prevailing. So Koti is 10 to the power of 7, Shanka is 10 to the power of 12, Mahashanka is 10 to the power of 17. So all these are explained. Oga is 10 to the power of 57, and Mahogha is 10 to the power of 62. All these are mentioned, and in the sloka, it is said that, the size of the army is 10 squared, 10 to the power of 10, plus 10 to the power of 14, plus 10 to the power of 20, plus 10 to the power of 24, plus 10 to the power of 30, plus 10 to the power of 34, plus 10 to the power of 40, plus 10 to the power of 44, plus 10 to the power of 52, plus 10 to the power of 57, plus 10 to the power of 62 plus 5. That is mentioned as the size of Bhagavan Rama's army. So we can understand the kind of mathematical calculations that people were doing at that point of time, the kind of representation that is there in our scriptures in terms of the genius of mathematics that was utilized. And these we are speaking about the really old precise, like Valmiki Ramayana itself, which happened during the Treta Yuga. And when we come to the scientific things, like, possibly the astronomical work of Aryabhatta and other things, it is a very, very different kind of calculation which is involved. In fact, there are mathematical treatises which are written, which involve, they've even given the pi value during ancient times. So a lot of such scientific mention can be observed in our scriptures. Yet another very, very interesting example is about the speed of light. This is based on Sayanacharya's Bhashya of the Rig Mantra. He says, Yojananam sahasre dve, dveshate, dvecha yojane, ekena nimishardena, kramamana namostute. So here, he offers salutation to Surya Bhagavan, who travels at the speed of 2202 yojanas in half a nimisha. When we observe this beautiful sloka, it is very, very interesting that it has the Bhakti Bhava, offering salutations to Surya Bhagavan. That is the important Bhakti Bhava part. But when we look at the science involved in this, it says, Yojananam sahasra. Sahasra means 1,000. Yojananam sahasre. So 1,000 yojanas. Dve shate. Add 200 to it. Shata is 100, 200. Dve shate. Dve cha yojane. Add 2 more yojanas to it. So there is 2,202 yojanas. Ekena nimishardena. In half a nimisha, a person who travels 2,202 yojanas. So 1 yojana can be taken approximately as 9 miles and 110 yards. So the total number of miles, when we calculate with respect to the time taken, gives us the speed of light. And this speed of light matches with the modern value with less than 5% deviation, which is amazing, because how did our ancestors during the Rig Veda time know about the speed of light? They had the vision. So it is Bhagavat Kripa which allowed them to find out these scientific things, and this is documented in Chainacharya's Bhashya of the Rig Mantra 1.50.4. So these kind of scientific revelations, which is coupled with the Bhakti Bhava and the Jnana and the revelations that our ancestors had, gives us the beautiful Jnana of our ancestors, which we have to carry and leave as a legacy to our next generation. Vedas, as we know, was called as Chandas itself earlier. And when we look at Chandas, again, there is so much of maths and science involved in the Chanda Shastra. Chandas is all about the metrics that we use for slokas, poetry, and presentation. And every Sanskrit sloka has a meter associated to it. This was originally used more on the Vedas, after which it was expanded starting from the Valmiki Ramayana. All our granthas and other literary works also started having chandas. So this chandas is one of the 6 Vedangas, or the limbs of Vedas. So when we look at chandas, we have the concept of lagu and guru. Lagu is 1 akshara matra, guru is the 2 akshara matras. So when we have a combination of lagu and guru, that will lead us to three aksharas typically, right? One lagu and one guru, because guru itself is two aksharas, the combination will lead to three. Or if we reverse it again, one guru and one lagu will also give us the combination of three. So here, guru and lagu can also be understood as zeros and ones, like today's binary representation. So lagu could be 0 and guru could be 1. A combination of this can be represented. Now, when we look at these kind of combinations, so when we have 3 beats or 2 beats, we saw that we could have 3 combinations. So when we have 4 beats, similarly, we can have 5 combinations. For 5 beats, we can have 9 combinations. 6 beats, 13 combinations. 7 beats, 21 combinations. 8 beats, 34 combinations. So this can go all the way to infinity. So if you just write down this sequence, it is 1, 2, 3. And then if you just write down the combinations here, So 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. So this sequence will go on all the way to infinity. So the birth of this was from the Chanda Shastra. So this Chanda Shastra was given to us by sage Pingala Maharishi Dattavan. So this is today called as the Fibonacci series. And this concept of lagu and guru, which is represented as a single akshara or the 2 aksharas, when represented as 0 and 1, is the binary that we use in our computer industry today. All the inputs are in the form of binary, right? Zeros and ones. So that again has its original presentation in the Chanda Shastra. Not just this, when the series is placed on top of one another, a pyramid is developed, which was called as the Matra Meru earlier. And today we call it as a Pascal's triangle. So that again is a mathematical application which came to us through the Chanda Shastra. A few other very, very interesting revelations with respect to science in our scriptures. One was from the Surya Siddhanta. In the 12th chapter, 32nd sloka, it mentions about what we call as the Dharanatmika Shakti, which can be understood as the gravitational power. So in Surya Siddhanta, which is an astronomical text, it explains that the earth is standing firmly in space without falling away because of this Dharanatmika Shakti. And this is not one exclusive place where gravity is mentioned. It has also been mentioned by Bhaskaracharya in Siddhanta Shironmani, where he says, Earth naturally attracts every object in space towards itself. Because of its attracting force, all the objects fall on the Earth. When there is balance and attraction among the planets, how could they fall? So he explains about the gravitation in Earth and how all the planets stand where they are. So both are explained in the Siddhanta Shironmani, which was very, very interesting. In fact, in the Prashnopanishad's explanation, Sri Adi Shankaracharya himself says that as the earth attracts whatever objects which is thrown up, the prana shakti in our body is being pulled down by the apana shakti. So he explains our breathing process with the help of the gravitational force itself. So multiple locations, the concept of gravity has been explained in our scriptures, which is very, very interesting. In fact, there is a news item also which mentions about a very interesting concept of gravity, where the ISRO chief, G. Mahadevan Nair, who used to be the former ISRO chief, has mentioned that 1500 years before Isaac Newton, our scriptures have mentioned about the concept of gravity, which was very interesting to note. And even for the Chandrayaan, they had used the equation of Aryabhatta. So these are such very interesting revelations for us, where so much of science has been incorporated in our Sanatana Dharma, in our Vedic knowledge. Not just in mathematics or astronomy, even in medical science, our ancestors pioneered so many concepts which, the other parts of the world had to catch up. For example, Sushruta, who's today known as the father of plastic surgery or the rhinoplasty, he used to do it, in a very, very interesting manner. If you have a look at Sushruta Samhita, the process of replacing a nose using plastic surgery is explained very, very beautifully. In fact, a few hundred years back, in other parts of the world, people used to take the skin from the arm of the person and place the arm near the nose, tie it up, and ask them to hold it on in the same position for like 48 days or something, to ensure that part of the skin gets attached to the nose. And then after surgery, if it still sticks on, then the nose replacement used to be done. I think this was practiced somewhere in Europe and all that. But if you look at the Sushruta Samhita, he mentions that we have to take a leaf, the details of which is given, place it on the nose which needs replacement, draw the outline of the nose as a template, reverse the leaf to the forehead, draw the template, and then he says, while the connection to the live skin still exists, we have to leave some part of the live skin to exist, and then invert the part from the forehead to the nose for the replacement. And he's asked them to use wine so that it will work as an anesthesia, so people will not know the pain. So anesthesia did exist at that point of time. And he says, because the skin is taken from the forehead to the nose, the skin in the face, will have the same color complexion, so that this person need not feel embarrassed for the rest of his life. Think about it. If the skin is taken from a different part of our body, there would be a color difference. Sushruta, a Maharishi, was also conscious about that fact. And he said, replacing it from the forehead will avoid them from being embarrassed in the future. So that kind of a rhinoplasty was done. And today it's still known as the Indian style of rhinoplasty, and it is practiced in different parts of the world. So much of medical advancement was also there, and such depth of thought thousands of years back, which is applicable even today, which is practiced even today, was handed over by our ancestors to us. I will conclude with one very, very interesting understanding of the implementation of science in our scriptures. All of us know that Srimad Valmiki Ramayana is our Adi Kavya. And Hanumanji went to Lanka looking for Mata Sita. Now, this explanation is mentioned in the Sundaraganda. If you look at the 8th Sarga, Hanumanji, after reaching Lanka, is looking at so many different things. And he sees one great Vimana there. And the sloka says that he saw the best of the best Vimanas, which was shining with the name of Pushpaka. It had, the rays of precious stones, and it was capable of traveling long distances. Now, if we take a closer look at the words that is used here, the Vimana is mentioned as best among the best of the Vimanas, which means Pushpaka Vimana was not the only Vimana. There were many Vimanas, and this looked like the best among all the best Vimanas. So, well, there's so many Vimanas, and we are speaking about the time of Valmiki Ramayana, which is like, we are in Kali Yuga now. Before this was the Dwapar Yuga of Bhagavan Krishna. Prior to that was, the Ramayana times. So at that point of time, Hanumanji is mentioning this. So all these, if we look at it, are from Vedas itself. Vedas mention about Ashwini Kumara using the Vimanas. And there are several mentions about that in the Rig Veda itself, the oldest treatise that we have today. And we also have a Grantha, which is called as the Vaimanika Shastra, which is attributed to the Bharadwaja Maharishi. Now, the Vaimanika Shastra is the ancient scripture which defines a aeroplane, the pilot, the aerial routes, what kind of food should they eat when they travel, the kind of clothing, the metals that are used and how those metals need to be produced, the kind of mirrors that should be used in the aircrafts, and the different uses for which the flying machines can be used, like they can be used in wars, the varieties of machines, the yantras that can be used. And very, very interestingly, the aircrafts have been defined as mantrik, tantrik, and kritak. So it looks like, we did have, if we are comparing it with today's date, age, and time, possibly we did have Vimanas, which was activated by the sound, like the voice activated devices we have today, like the Google or the Alexa and things like that. Possibly there were voice activated flying machines during that point of time, because when we say mantras are those which are activated by sound, right? So it is all the oral tradition that we were using. So there were mantric planes and there were tantric planes, they say, which are like, the robot or remote activated devices. And the kritak is something where we have to do it manually, like the planes that we are using now. So in Kali Yuga, only the manual things are available, it seems. And they had 4 different planes, which were the Shakuna, the Sundara, the Rukma, the Tripura Vimana. All these are explained in detail. The Tripura Vimana could be understood as, a submarine which could go on underwater. It could also go on the land, and it could also fly. A 3-in-1 kind of a Vimana is called as a Tripura Vimana. And in addition to this, Vaimanika Shastra gives a lot of techniques on how to fly. It mentions different types of flying machines which were there. 32 different techniques to fly an aircraft are also mentioned. So the Vaimanika Shastra has 8 chapters, 3,000 slokas, over 100 topics on the Vimanas itself. Around 500 sutras or the principles are mentioned, with, of course, the 32 techniques that I mentioned. And this speaks about how one can, go to very, very far places, far distant lands using the Vimanas. They say that, we could fly from one place to another, one country to another, or even travel between planets. So much of elaboration is given on Vimanas. It seems a glass-like material which can't be detected by radar was developed by Professor Dongre, a research scholar of the Benares Hindu University, based on a technology found in the ancient Sanskrit text, the Vaimanika Shastra, the text that we have just been discussing. So if a plane is coated with this unique material, then it can't be even detected by the radar, which means they knew about the radar. They knew about, some technology where the radar will not even detect the plane. And yet another very, very interesting thing which happened is a few years ago, the Chinese discovered some Sanskrit documents in Lhasa, Tibet, and they sent it to the University of Chandigarh for translation. Dr. Ruth Rayna of the university said that the documents contained directions for building interstellar spaceships. And the Chinese announced that they are including certain parts of the documents for study in their space program. So there are so many granthas which contain these kind of, amazing scientific knowledge, which can be a learning even today. This Vimana that we were mentioning also speaks about what we call as the Surya Ganta Mani, which is a very, very powerful device which can take the energy from the sun and retain that energy. This tapped energy can even propel planes. Today we speak about the solar powered cars. We are attempting to do some solar powered technology to start utilizing the power. Those were used even for aeroplanes, it seems. So this kind of very, very interesting information is there in our Brihat Vimana Shastra. Luckily, the Vaimanika Shastra is still available for us. So we could get a copy, look into it, look into the details, which is really, really amazing, which our ancestors have given us. So much of knowledge is available in abundance, just that we have to know what is available. We have to at least know the index page of what our ancestors have given us. And very, very importantly, we should also know the bhasha, the language in which these are written, because that becomes the key to get into all the different sources of knowledge. I would like to tell a small story before concluding. This is a story which I learned from Samskrita Bharati, who propagate teaching spoken Sanskritam. And it seems there was a beggar who earned his living just by going to different houses every day and begging for his basic living. So in some houses, they would give him some money. In some houses, they would just shoo him off saying, go, 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 nothing is there for you. In some houses, they would give him some clothing or something like that. Few others will say, no, go today, come tomorrow, or something like that. So after a hard day, getting, some basic food or clothing or whatever is, received, he would go to his specific location, which was under a tree, sit there. And as he fell asleep, he would start dreaming, how would my life be if I was rich? What kind of a bungalow will I be in? What kind of a bed I will have? What kind of AC and other facilities can I enjoy? If only I had some money at my disposal. I go begging for money with so many people, and this is the way I'm treated. So when he sleeps, he would assume himself to be a very rich person and start dreaming accordingly. So towards the end of his lifetime, he called his son and he said, look, because of my poverty, different people treated me very, very differently. But this place under this tree is where I've spent most of my life in. So my only request for you is, let my antima samskars be under this tree. That is my only request for you. So the son said, okay. And this old beggar finds the end of his life. He dies. And the son, as promised, for the antima samskar, starts to dig the place under the tree. As soon as he starts digging, he sees a huge treasure trove. The trove has like rubies, emeralds, gold, silver. Think of it, it's there. So much of treasure. It's a treasure house underneath, right exactly below where he was sitting. He was sitting on top of all these treasures. Now his son starts thinking, was my father actually rich or poor? He was sitting on top of so much of money, but without even realizing that there is so much for him. So he spent his entire life in poverty, though so much of riches was there right where he was. Coming to think of it, all of us are there in this Bharata Bhumi, which has so much of resource. All our ancestors have given us so much of knowledge treasure. All we have to do is open it, see it, enjoy it, relish it. But unfortunately, today, we do not have the key to open it up. The treasure box is there, but we can't open it up. There is one huge library, which was Bhojaraja's personal collections, which is called as the Saraswati Mahal Library in Tanjavur, where I heard that there are 100,000 asprashta granthas, the granthas which are not even touched, they are now being eaten away by termites. And the reason is because many of these granthas are in Sanskritam, and because people don't know it, they don't access it, these are, being eaten by termites. But we've translated the grantha of interstellar spaceships, and the Chinese are working on that model. So what we have to do is some way, somehow, open up the ancient treasures, understand what our ancestors have given us, go through the index page so that we know that all these are available to us. So with this, I would like to conclude with a pratana for Lokakshema, because today's scenario, everybody wants to regain the health. So I would like to chant the Namatrayi sloka to conclude. Achyutananda Govinda Namocharana Beshajat Nashyanti Sakalarogha Satyam Satyam Vadamyaham. Achyutaya Namaha Anantaya Namaha Govindaya Namaha. Kayena Vacha Manasendriyaiva Buddhyatmana va Prahride Swabhavat Karomi Yatyat Sakalam Parasmai Narayanayeti Samarpayami. The Achyuta, Ananta and Govinda, these three namas, Vedavyasa Maharishi, who has given us all the Vedas, he says, it is the truth and nothing but the truth. These three namas will help you get rid of all the diseases. So at this juncture, I would just like to request all of us to recite these three names all the time for the Lokakshema. Thank you once again for this lovely opportunity. Namaskara.
Sai Ram. On behalf of our whole Veda Poshana family, I would like to express my gratitude towards our today's distinguished guest speaker, Srimati Praveena Anand ji, whose all-round knowledge on the divine Vedas dissipated tremendous energy among all the listeners in the form of a mesmerizing speech. Starting from Rishi Bharadwaja's story, she left us awestruck with her profound knowledge on the Anadi, Ananta and Aparusheya Vedas. She threw some light on the origin of 4 Vedas, 6 Vedangas, 4 Upangas, 4 Upavedas, 18 Vidyasthanas and 64 Kalas. The meaning of the word Bharatam, Bharati, Bharatiya, importance of correct pronunciation of the mantras, benefits of Sanskrit in speech therapy for the patients of cleft lip, the fact that Pythagoras' theorem was originally a Bodhayana Sutra, occurrence of multiples of 4 in Taittiriya Samhita, counting of Bhagwan Rama's army, calculation of speed of light, the science involved in the description of Chandas, explanation of rhinoplasty by Acharya Sushrut, very interesting knowledge about the various types of vimanas in the ancient times, mathematics, science, astronomy and what not. Our Vedas include them all. The crux of today's satsanga lies in the biggest story. Think of it and it's here. All of us are here in this pious Bharata Bhumi, the true descendants of our Vedic culture. All we need to do is to dive deep in this Jnana Ganga and spread it in all the corners of the world. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Jai Jagadish Hare Swami Satya Sai Hare Bhakta Jana Samrakshaka Bhakta Jana Samrakshaka Pati Maheshwara Om Jai Jagadish Hare Shashivadana Shrikara Sarva Pranapati Swami Sarva Pranapati Ashrita Kalpalatika Ashrita Kalpalatika Avatandhava Om Jai Jagadish Hare Mata Pita Guru Daivamu Mariyantayuni ब्रह्म जगन्नाथ नाद ब्रह्म जगन्नाथ नागेन्द्रशयन ॐ जय जगदीश हरे ओंकार रूप ओजस्वी हो साई महादेवा सत्य साई महादेवा मंगल आरती अंधुको मंगल आरती अंधुको मंगल गिरिधारी ओम जय जगदीश हरे नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा शांति 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 समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय।